Hey everybody, welcome to the new Dawn of Drones podcast. I am so excited to be here with you today and to share this kickoff moment with our special guest, Luke Fox, the CEO of WhiteFox Defense. He's also the sponsor of this entire month. So we are going to be focusing every month on a specific theme. This month is all about high impact use cases. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And at the end, I'll give you a preview of kind of what's to come for the rest of the month. But it's going to be amazing. And I wanted to thank up front, not only Luke, of course, and WhiteFox, but DroneLife for promoting this podcast and taking it on and putting it on their platform. So all you DroneLife fans out there, hello, welcome. So great to have you. By the way, this is a live stream, so engage with us. Jump into the chat, introduce yourself, make comments, ask questions, give us positive encouragement. We love that, right? So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And welcome to the podcast, Luke.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So for those that aren't very familiar with you, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Luke Fox, the CEO of WhiteFox Defense. We specialize in ensuring that drones operate the way they should. So we ensure that the drones that should be flying are flying, the ones that shouldn't be flying. So we detect, identify, and mitigate safely and securely the drones that are, whether they're being flown from reckless pilots or malicious pilots around the world. And we'll dive into more deeper on the use cases there, from stopping terrorists dropping bombs to stopping drug smugglers from bringing drugs and contraband into places they shouldn't, as well as just stopping 14-year-old kids from accidentally taking down an airliner. It's really an everyday threat that stands in the way of unlocking the full potential that drones offer to benefit society.
I always find it so funny, Luke, that when I ask people to tell me about themselves, they so identify with their company or what they're doing in their job that they just jump right into what their company's all about. Tell us about you. Tell us about how you even got started in this business, just to kind of inspire us and give us some background.
Sure, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that, because I mean it's what I live and breathe. Every single waking moment. Wake up at 3 a.m. and I'm like, forgot to do that thing. Got to send that email. But a little background on myself. So I started out making drones because I thought, wow, drones have the opportunity to completely change the world. This was about around a decade ago. Started developing a drone platform and thought, okay, I'm going to sell it to humanitarian aid. I'm going to send it researchers, nonprofits, all these people who could benefit from drone technology. So I thought, okay, well, what's the problem? I need to make drones easy to fly and easy to operate. Well, it turns out once you start doing that, turns out that really sketchy people wanted to buy my drones and were trying to buy my drones. And that's where I realized, wow, in a couple cases, I won't go into too many details to protect everybody involved, but you can't know who's going to buy your drones and how they're going to use them. Are they going to use them to try to assassinate someone? Are they going to use them to try to smuggle drugs? Right. And so realizing that, I said, I could stand with my drone here 100 miles away from the White House, launch it, walk away, and no one would be able to stop it or even know it was coming. And I thought that's a massive problem. And also it's a massive problem because, it's funny. People say, oh, well, I pivoted. I never pivoted my company. I started out as a drone manufacturer, and now we do counter drone technology, but I've done it for the exact same reason, to unlock the full potential of drones. And I realized that making a drone cheaper, making a drone easier to fly isn't what makes drone technology truly reach its full potential. It's making drone technology that is trusted. And in order to do that, you need people to be able to trust drones, know who's operating, that they're supposed to be there. And if they're not supposed to be there, then stopping them safely, not blasting them out of the sky. There's a time and place to blast things out of the sky, but that's not, that doesn't unlock the future.
Yeah, well, we'll get into those blasting authorities here in a minute. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about really what inspired you, which is kind of this drones for good. use case scenario. Yeah, you had a couple maybe shady folks wanting to buy the drones you were
Yeah.
creating. But let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there on the drones for good side. Like you had mentioned
Yes.
humanitarian aid and some things. So what are some of the things that you're seeing that really right now, and maybe in the last year or so, are inspiring you?
Yeah. I mean, what we're seeing that's really interesting with drone technology is we've seen we've seen a rise in drone technology that has led to a commoditization of it, right? Anybody can get access to it. Anybody can launch a drone, for better or for worse, right? But what that means is we see a lot of really interesting use cases. I mean, we work with Brett Belikovich, who is using drone technology in Africa to stop poachers, right?
Oh,
And
wow. That's
it's
so
kind of,
cool.
yeah, and it's like he, at the same time they're doing that, the poachers are using drones to be able to carry out their illegal activities, right? And so it's like it's leveling the playing field when we start to say, well, what are all the ways we can use drones to ensure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And one of the really interesting things is drones, and many people have seen like the YouTube videos of drones flying and all the animals running, and it looks really cool, but that's actually really bad for the animals because it means they're spooked.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of what's being done on the anti-poaching side, which is using drones to herd animals away from poachers, right? So being able to see where the poachers are, we're dropping down the drone. Now elephant goes and runs that way. Poachers now can't get elephant, right?
Oh, wow.
It's just like it's so neat how the beauty of it is also the downside. It's like the double-edged sword.
Yeah, no, so true. And you're mentioning Africa and poachers, and I know one of my super fans, Kim James, is out there.
Yeah.
She's with Women in Drones and helps with the fireside chats and whatnot. Women in Drones Africa, and I know she's very involved in the security aspect of using drones out there in Africa, and she's in South Africa. But so many other things. I mean, I just read an article, Luke, and I'm sure you saw it. Where was it in the United Arab Emirates? They're
Yep.
like flying drones up into the clouds and like somehow sparking like rain.
Yeah.
So I mean, these are, and
Yeah.
really like literally the sky is the limit when you think about drone technology and what it can be used for good. And as you said, for bad. So let's talk about that. A good friend of mine, Travis Moran, he's on the Urban Low Altitude Transport Association Ultra board with me. He always talks about the clueless,
Careless
the careless
and the
and the
criminal.
criminal.
Yep.
You have a fourth category that
Yes, don't forget the fourth seat, the compliant, right?
imagine that,
Right.
because look, it's almost like when I was in the Air Force, and there's always a couple bad actors, right? But it's such a small percentage, and it really, but though that small percentage of people they have such a strategic impact.
Yes.
Because what is the media picking up? Like you saw this beautiful, right, drone display of 1,800 drones at the
Yeah.
Tokyo Olympics, which everybody was talking about.
Yeah.
And then what do we just see? What was it yesterday? The day
Yep.
before, the World Trade
World
Center?
Trade Center. Yeah.
Some schmuck like crashes into the World Trade Center, wedges his drone into the
Right.
soffit. Like seriously, dude, what are you thinking? And so let's talk about a little bit about those categories and kind of what you're seeing as trends.
Yeah, absolutely. When we excuse me, when we think about like the clueless, the careless, the criminal, and the compliant, it's really easy to focus on the criminal, right? The bad actors doing something malicious. And not just the criminal, but the criminal is two categories. One is the opportunistic criminal, right? Like the drug smugglers who are smuggling drugs into prisons. They say, I'm going to smuggle drugs into prison. I'm going to use whatever's the easiest way to do it. It happens to be drones. If you stop them from using drones, they'll find something else. Now, I would argue that drones offer the most effective, affordable, like if I was a drug smuggler, like it's ridiculous. I mean, like being able to get this much drugs into a prison with a single drop is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
I did
all
just
that,
finish Breaking Bad, by the way. It was spectacular. So, but
right?
I'm surprised they didn't use a drone.
I know. I was
Yeah,
surprised too. I mean,
yeah.
when you think about like right now, I'll give you a quick example of something that happened that we're seeing rise across the country. Speaking of drugs, is really interesting. So and this, I mean, this this sound, you don't have to believe me because it sounds so ridiculous, but we're seeing this as a trend. So there are drug houses that have holes in the roof where the drones, when they get a call that, oh, the cops are coming to raid the place, they'll literally launch the drone out with all the evidence out the hole in the roof.
Oh
Like, and
man.
this isn't a one-off. This is like multiple times. Like, it's a
So,
trend
and
across
it's
the
so
country.
much better than flushing it down the toilet, right? Like,
Right?
so talk about exigent circumstances for the cops, like
Yeah.
busting down the door, the drones flying up there.
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane. I had no idea that was happening.
Absolutely. And the amount you can get on a single drone, you get a couple of drones, right? And it's ridiculous. And then we're also seeing, just on the drug smuggling side, in that kind of realm of the house, where people are using drones as spotters, right? To see what is law enforcement doing, where are they doing, or if they're planning an operation. They'll watch them and they'll sit there and watch. Okay, they're going around back behind the house, right? And the problem with law enforcement that they have is they don't know that drone in the sky, is it a curious neighbor, right? We just saw this in Florida where they were serving a search warrant and they were flying the sheriff drone. And some guy is like, there's a drone hovering above my house, and he shot it down.
Yeah.
Right.
Wasn't he the bad guy though? Like, wasn't he?
No,
Oh, he wasn't the perp.
I think he had some pride. I think he had some pride. He wasn't the same. I don't know. I won't say anything about him, but he wasn't the guy they were chasing. He was the neighbor, right? Because from his point of view, there's a drone hovering above his house, right? Like, how are they supposed to identify themselves? And we could dive deeper into that, but that's something that WhiteFox is very much concerned about, is how do you detect, identify, and mitigate the reckless and the malicious, but also how do you verify and authenticate the authorized?
Yeah, that word authentication is really important. And what the remote ID, and this, Luke, preaching to the choir, that came out in January, and we're still dribs and drabs of additional policy coming out. And where are we with the technology, and how's that going to look? I mean, it's not technically required, right, for pilots to have it on board until 2023. Manufacturers have a truncated timeline for that and everything. But before we get into how your technology today can help identify those things, let's like pivot a little bit to this other aspect of criminal, which is not just the opportunistic, but like the terroristic. So
yes,
we just saw a drone attack on an Israeli flagged ship, right? And people died. I mean, that was a commercial liner, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And that is very frightening. Yes, there's a lot of geopolitics involved, but you're talking about commercial industry here, and an attack on it from a nation, allegedly from a nation state. And of
but
course,
that's the key problem. Right. That's the key problem, is when typically with acts of war, you have somewhat of there's enough of a barrier to entry, right? Where in order to carry out any sizable attack, that is a nice cup. I really like that cup. I like big cups.
Actually, my son got this when he had surgery.
It's
has
fantastic.
Like it measures how much you're drinking. So
okay, I'm gonna hit you up for that.
I get my fill, every day.
We'll put WhiteFox branded surgery cups. But all that being said, is like, there's typically, in order to carry out a substantial attack, there's typically one of two things. One is you have a high barrier to entry. So you have to have a jet, you have to have some missile system, you have to have something that's going to carry out a significant amount of damage. Or if you're more on the rogue state lone actor side, you have to have a community of support. So you have to talk to people, you have to get financing, you have to get the dirty bomb material, you have to do that. What's really interesting, and that second category, is what's kind of perplexed counterterrorism efforts for the last decade, especially. But what is really interesting is with drones, is it doesn't take much to carry out this drone attack, right? It could be a complete lone wolf. It could be a single guy, right, that just wants to cause some chaos, or it could be an entire country, right? The barrier to entry is so low, and the amount of communication and coordination is so low. You can't use traditional military efforts or counterintelligence efforts. So you're stuck in this position of saying, well, who did it? Right. Or was it a false flag? Right. Yeah. It's you have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, so on the battlefield is one thing, and I wouldn't say necessarily that recent event was technically a battlefield, right? But
it was an act of war. potentially, right?
Yeah.
If a nation state did that. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not an expert. I'm not a legal expert, but
yeah, it was definitely unprovoked and under international humanitarian law. I mean, that was a huge foul right there. I think the flag country could make those claims. But what was I saying? With regard to the well, let's talk about, battlefield. So on the battlefield, right, even
yeah.
now, this military technology has IFF, right, identify friend or foe, and that's typically for the larger aircraft. So I know
Hmm.
a company that's working hard to get that size, weight, and power
Yep.
squared away. Sage Tech Avionics as an example.
Yeah.
And there are other companies as well, but it's one thing on the battlefield, like even, just say like in the United States, right? Remote ID, or
Hmm.
anywhere that adopts, say, a similar rule to what we just did with remote ID.
Yep.
And by the way, Europe went network, not just broadcast. Okay, but
Yep.
whatever. Um, that only will work if someone is actually compliant, right? I mean, in
Hmm.
other words, if you don't register your drone, and I
Yep.
assume the bad guys will choose not to, if we're in the criminal category,
Hmm.
um, then you're not going to actually be able to identify them. So let's talk about what your technology is doing. And I know,
Absolutely.
Luke, you have the DroneFox, you have
Yep.
Stratus. So walk us through kind of what you're doing today.
For sure. But I also want to challenge something you just said,
Okay, yeah, please.
which is that the bad guys aren't going to register their drones. No, the bad guys are going to register their drones.
Oh,
That's the problem. Because when you going back to the A word you said,
yeah,
authentication,
yeah,
right? And the problem is that if you have something that's completely unauthenticated, then the value proposition in not registering it is actually quite low. It's actually, if I were a bad guy, I would register my drone and say that I'm Johnny Smith Appleseed
oh,
when I'm
so
registering.
falsely register or something.
Exactly.
I see.
And then on top of that, then you could then also steal someone's registration quite easily. You could easily spoof someone's identity, right? So
Mhm.
you could either make up an identity or spoof an identity, because there's two sides of there's two huge gaps there.
Yeah,
One is the authentication that matches the identity of the registrar, the person that's registering the drone, with the drone itself and the registration, tying that triangle together.
yeah,
That triangle is insecure because how does the FAA going to verify that if I say I'm Johnny Appleseed, I'm not Johnny Appleseed? But then on the other side is the triangle of the drone with the operation with the pilot and slash the registration. So drone is flying. Who's to say that what that drone is broadcasting, the identity and the pilot information that it's broadcasting, that as part of that operation is all accurate? There, if you can't authenticate either one of those triangles, you have a huge gap. And so if I were a bad guy, I'm not going to just not register. I'm going to say I'm law enforcement. I'm supposed to be here, right?
yeah, yeah. Interesting. So how does WhiteFox Defense, how
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you solve that, let's call it the dual triangle problem?
Yes.
Like what do you guys bring to the fight?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the first triangle, that is something that you need an authority to solve. Now, such as the FAA saying, we're going to require all drone pilots to submit a picture of, hold up their ID next to their face. I don't know,
Got
right?
it. Got it. Yeah. Right.
There's technology out there to do that. You have to take a picture and and it verifies that your face matches your ID, and there's different
Mhm.
things like that. I don't know if that's going to happen. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, but
Yeah.
that's a separate issue. Most importantly, is in the field knowing that drone is at least who it says it was, because if for example you might not require all all drone pilots to comply with the first triangle, but you might have law enforcement. The FAA says, well, law enforcement, in order to be able to say that you're a law enforcement drone, you need to be able to even have a gov email address. Okay,
Okay.
so they may do that. But then the second triangle is still a major issue. And so what WhiteFox does is we have a couple things. One is that we have systems deployed across the country, known as Stratus, where uh, our customers can log in. So let's say an airport can log in and be able to see what drones are flying around me. They don't have to install anything. They don't have to put any hardware out because we're already covering that entire city. And
Yeah.
so by tracking all the drones in the city, they can see, okay, what drones are flying around me, but they can also see, okay, where's this drone launching from, right? Is it launching from, and this is this is a very real case with customer. They could see the drone launching from the police department, right?
Mm.
Literally from the police department roof. Okay, you see it there launching every day. And you can, WhiteFox, we have a patented fingerprinting algorithm. So we can fingerprint the drone and then you can type in police drone, right?
Mm.
Like, excuse me.
So you can
It doesn't
you
have to,
can build
yeah,
up a historical record
exactly.
and start identifying trends. We were talking about trends earlier in general, but
Yes.
trends of specific aircraft that might be around your facility.
Yes. Or the ones that you're authorizing, right? That you can whitelist the drone. So there's the idea of a known drone, an unknown drone, which all drones are by default with their system. But then you also can have a friendly drone, which is different than a known drone. I'll give you an example of a known drone. We have a customer where they had this drone that kept coming and flying over their facility. And they're like, this is really, concerning and we think it's the same drone. They were able to identify, yes, it's the same drone, but also it's being flown from this apartment complex parking lot. So they just sent over a security team, just like they would send over, you know, they'd send over anybody to talk to somebody suspicious, which is
Yeah.
kind of a side rant. But when one of the funny things that we have with sometimes that comes up with customers is they're like, oh, I need to know all the FAA rules so I can, enforce them. I'm like, no, you don't.
No,
Like,
you don't have the
that's not your,
authority to enforce them,
yeah,
but
you're not even allowed it. Not even law enforcement can enforce the FAA rules. All you need to do is enforce the rules that if there's a suspicious, sketchy person doing something that's suspicious, you go get eyes on them. And that's
yeah.
why we send a text message notification that says, hey, there's a drone that's flying over the facility, and here's the location of the pilot. Right. Just like if there were, anybody that was suspicious over there, you go get eyes on you, go talk to them. Hey, what's going on? Or you go and watch them. You're like, wow, they are doing something suspicious.
And
Right. You're
so
not going to say, oh, you are flying at exactly the altitude you're not supposed to be flying at.
yeah, right. Not their lane necessarily, right?
Yeah.
So, but this known person, once the apartment guy,
Yes.
they go over there and they realize he was not acting nefariously. So what was the
Yes.
story in that
Oh,
one?
yeah. So to complete the story, so they're able to have a conversation with him. He didn't realize that he wasn't supposed to be flying over there. And they could have argued. What they could have done that I'm glad they didn't is argue, oh, well, according to FAA, this is a no-fly zone. You're not supposed to be loitering over the facility. You only could fly over it, but you can't loiter and they go and all that. They're like, hey, like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, getting pretty pictures of the sunset. It's this great view and it's this time of month and all this stuff. And so instead of going into lecturing him, they're like, hey, well, do you need to fly over the facility, every day to do that? He's like, no. Okay, great. Easy. So, and then they go into the system and they just log his name, his phone number. And so if it ever flies over the facility, they can give him a call and be like, hey, just so you know that, you're flying over the facility, you're causing an issue here. Right.
Yeah.
And so it allows this communication coordination, which right now, so much of drone technology, people are just scared about and they panic. And then you create this like adversarial relationship. And what I see, unfortunately, with a lot of drone pilots, not all drone pilots, nobody send me angry emails after this, but what we're seeing in practice is drone pilots are like standing their ground and, knowing their rights. And that's not how you do it. And same with, with our customers, we're like, it's not about, going and beating someone over the head with your right to say that what they should be doing. Just
Right.
like as a pilot, it's knowing your rights. Sure, know your rights, but it's much more important to say, okay, well, how is this causing a problem? How can I better operate here?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So you said you can in your system, Stratus,
Yeah.
which by the way, Luke, let's brag a little
Yeah.
bit. I mean, this is the first cloud-based system
Yeah.
of its kind. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
it being able to see without having anybody having any hardware, seeing hundreds of thousands of drones flying across the country with extremely accurate, within 3-meter level precision accuracy of where the drone is, how it's flying, the altitude it's flying, who's where the person is that's flying it. Really getting the understanding how drones are operating. Right now, people don't know how drones are operating.
And so This is like a subscription that people basically sign up for the Stratus system, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So traditionally with counter drone technology, you have to go out, you have to go look at systems, you have to go test a bunch of systems to see if they actually work, what's snake oil, what actually works, and then you have to plan the installation, then you have to coordinate that, and you have to do all these things. Well, with Stratus, you have to do any of that, right? We say, look, you want to know how many drones were flying over your facility last month? We just had this with the customer. We said, we gave him a report. Did you know that on average, you had more than one drone hovering over your facility, spending and more than just passing over your facility? It's like 31 drones in the 30-day month, right? That we regard as suspicious. And so when you look at that, you can then say, okay, you don't need to go through all this testing. You don't have to does it work? Like it works. You could see that it works. And you, of course, could test it. You launch a drone, you get a text message, right? We'll give you a 24-hour free trial. You can hold me to that. But all that being said, then you simply get a text message. You simply, so then you can sign up. And it's a subscription. We're providing that coverage for your facility, whether it's a small business, whether it's a government facility, whether it's a port, an airport, whatever it is, law enforcement covering an entire city. And they simply get text message notifications. You could set different rules to say, if a drone flies over this part, I want an email. If it flies over this part, include it in the monthly report, right? If it flies within this part, send a text message to all these people because we need to be concerned.
Yeah. Wow.
Rather than there's just maybe a drone out there, which is what a lot of detection systems unfortunately tell you, which it really isn't that much because there's a lot more drone activity than most people realize, especially when you look at the altitudes drones are flying, right?
Yeah.
Most people are used to think like it's crazy how many times we've heard from people, we have a drone problem because we had this one incident or these few incidences. We're like, well, if you've had this one or few instances, you probably have a lot more drone activity than you realize. But
Yeah.
people are used to the fact that drones are really I love drones. I'm the biggest drone fan, but they can be kind of annoying with, how loud they are. And when they're right in front of you, like they're buzzing. But once you get it up a couple 100 feet, you don't know it's there, right? So from a security perspective, you can't just rely on being able to hear it.
Yeah, or even maybe necessarily see it, depending on, right, with the clouds. And I mean, I was
Yeah.
just in an indoor facility where one was being flown and I kept losing track. I mean, it could be my eyes. I'm horrible eyesight, but I couldn't keep
Yeah,
track of it, So
exactly.
speaking of Stratus, I
Yes.
just wanted to tell everybody out there that and DroneLife, I wrote an article about Stratus for DroneLife. So check it out on the DroneLife website.
Yes.
You can go to my P3 Tech consulting website under DroneLife tab and find it, but I, explain it in greater detail. And there's a couple of pictures because, picture paints 1,000 words. And I had the really cool opportunity to get that demo with your team, Luke, and
Yeah.
see this thing in action. And it was so let's talk, because we were in Clubhouse
Yes.
last week. And by the way, if you guys missed it, you really missed out. I mean, this is phenomenal. It was great last week. We kind of got into this idea.
And you do it weekly, right?
We do. Yeah.
Okay. So you missed it last week. Do it next. Everybody should join.
It's actually tomorrow. Yeah, we'll be on there tomorrow with next week's podcast guests, Ben Miller and Todd Spain. We'll be talking about wildland firefighting as one of the impactful use cases that we're going to be discussing this month. So yeah, definitely join in 11 o'clock Mountain, 1 o'clock Eastern PM. And that's in Drone Law Connections on Clubhouse. But what we talked about last week, Luke, was this idea of kind of bifurcating detection and mitigation, right? Because this idea of detection, I think people are under the mistaken impression that, they've heard this term, right? Oh, counter UAS is illegal. Right?
Yeah.
Illegal. Which obviously isn't the case. I mean, you clearly worked with the FCC and got all the right approvals, and you're working with, presumably, a lot of critical infrastructure clients. That, by the way, everybody out there, if you didn't know this, about 90% of this country's infrastructure is owned by the private sector.
Yep.
And really, it's up to them to protect the infrastructure that we use every single day as a society, which is kind of mind blowing when you think about it. But let's talk. Yeah. So the Stratus is like the mitigation. It's the detection piece. Like, so now I can see these things. Before remote ID is even online, I can be able to find that pilot and decide, okay, is this person legit? Are they just careless? Are they clueless? Or are they actually criminal? And that's when we call the cops, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about the other side of that, the actual mitigation
Yes.
of it, because I think that's where people have conflated the issue.
Yeah.
Clearly, there are only look, there's mitigation things like what we just talked about, walking up to somebody and saying, hey, like,
Yeah.
what you doing?
Right.
Versus, as you mentioned, shooting something out of the sky. Now,
Yeah.
buddies with Vic Moss and the folks at the Drone Service Providers Alliance,
Yep.
Kenji and Scott Stoffman, they're doing amazing things, and this is also becoming a trend
Yep.
of people shooting drones out of the sky
Yep.
or attacking drone pilots, which is completely unset.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what is legit. I mean,
Yes.
you and I both know there's only a handful of agencies, shall we say, that have the actual authority to, no kidding,
Yes.
mitigate.
Exactly. To do whatever is required to take that drone out of the sky, which, in case it's not clear, is not the general public, with a shotgun in their backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about, DOD was the first one out of the gate with 10 United States Code 130I.
Yep.
And even then, I mean, because I was a JAG for, Air Force lawyer for 25 years, and I was there when all this happened. People think the DOD writ large has this, it's very specific. It's like to protect strategic nuclear or space assets. Like there's a laundry list in that statute, and not every single military base falls under that. Now they can
most don't.
Yeah, they don't. So they can get special security instructions working with the FAA and other things like this. What else we have? What was it? The 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act, where Congress gave the authority to
DOJ, DHS, within the
FBI, Coast Guard,
but even them only for specific events with specific approvals.
Yes.
Right. And that's not really scalable, because people have this, people are shooting drones out of the sky with a shotgun because there's so much anxiety about drones. Right. But if they knew that, just like with law enforcement, like people aren't often, I guess depends what part of the country you go to, aren't shooting cars with a shotgun. Right. Yeah. Right. You're not blasting people out. It's because there's this anxiety about, like, well, nobody can protect me. Nobody can stop that this drone is doing this, and I don't know who's doing it. Right. It's that feeling of lack of transparency and lack of accountability, which creates that fear. And so, and then unfortunately with drone pilots, there have been a rise in attacks. Right. And that's how we solve that, though. Partially is remote ID. Right. And then the other side is, and we'll talk more about it, but it's just the sense that, like, when we saw the World Trade Center, like the fact that the World Trade Center, a drone crashed into it, that should not happen. No. Right. And all that does is confirm for people, dang, if I see a drone flying on my property, the World Trade Center can't even protect, like, we're not even protecting something that obviously is, like, 2 decades ago was attacked, and it's taken us 2 decades, and it's still being attacked by aviation assets, right? Accidentally or purposely.
Well, right? Don't you remember in 2015 that drunk droner, like 2 o'clock in the morning, landed on the White House lawn, and everybody's like, how? I mean, that really, I think, energized this idea of counter UAS.
Well, people stopped laughing at me after that, when I told them, like, hey, this little thing can cause more problems for you than something that someone spent $1 billion to me.
Absolutely.
Like, literally, the people stopped laughing. When you go and talk to law enforcement, these federal agencies, like, people really understood, like, and it's only going to keep getting worse as it becomes more accessible.
Yeah. So, like you said, remote ID is going to help this a little bit. Yep. What you're doing with Stratus is going to help it. We still have some limiting factors on the mitigation side. We talked about the laws that currently exist. I mean, frankly, our law enforcement brothers and sisters are somewhat hamstrung, right? Like,
yes, but that's yes.
I mean, which, it's like, look, they're the boots on the ground. When you think about the heartbeat of America and who is protecting the citizens on a daily basis, it's our brothers and sisters in blue. I mean, they're the ones that
absolutely
are going to get the phone call. Like,
yes,
the average citizen is not going to know to call the local FAA regional office.
But even the FAA, they're just going to say, okay, well, can you give us the address? Well, I mean, they're going to do a civil action at best. right?
Absolutely.
And law
Absolutely.
enforcement is then faced with the really unfortunate position of either saying, well, sorry, we can't do anything about that. But, and people are then going, well, I pay taxes and you can't protect me. So I'm going to get my
Yeah.
shotgun out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a very real case that happens every single day that we hear from law enforcement, or law enforcement goes out and they say, okay, well, this seems like it's a threat. Am I going to take the risk of, shooting into the air? I hope not. Right. That's like, there's something in between. And so that's where the DroneFox technology has really helped to enable different entities across the country to be able to safely mitigate drones. Just take control of the drone and land it. We're not talking about blasting out of the sky. There's no collateral damage. You're not jamming, right? Where you take out people's cell phones and, you hope that they aren't calling 911, right? You hope that somebody's pacemaker isn't affected by jamming, right? The unintended consequences that are unknown with jamming technology is it's an infinite. You have no idea what's going to happen when you turn on a jammer, right? You have no idea what's going to happen when you blast a drone out of the sky. Who's it's going to fall on? What's going to happen? What if you miss? What if you hit it and now you have a flaming ball of plasma from the battery? Right? Like
that's a visual. I'll never get out of my brain. So let's talk just about some of these limiting factors then, because you mentioned we talked about critical infrastructure, and boy, you talk about a hot topic today. The fact that the infrastructure bill was just I think from a bipartisan level, the terms are agreed upon. I haven't seen the final yet. We're all waiting for that. There's likely going to be some things in there about building out drone infrastructure, right?
There will be.
Drones for good.
Yes.
But let's talk about 2209.
Yes.
Okay, because that's been out there already. I mean,
mm-hmm.
That's already on the books. That's, by the way, a section in the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act where Congress said, hey, FAA, figure out a process for certain aspects of critical infrastructure, certain groupings, we'll call it, to apply for essentially, kind of a protective zone. I'll just use that term liberally, to kind of give those folks a tool to say, you're in my bubble.
Yeah.
And that has not been implemented yet. So let's talk a little about 2209. And, I know you've been very vocal about this, Luke, and, a group of like-minded people in industry.
Yes.
Tell us what your concerns are, and do you see that changing in the near term? Because look, to the FAA's credit, right, or in their defense, shall I say, it comes down to resources, right? Like to create this process and people you need
and to do it right.
People and
you want to do it right.
And to do it right. You don't want to just block off like 3/4 of the sky to any drone.
Yeah.
So given that 90% of critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on 2209 and where do you think this is going?
Yeah, 2209 is a really interesting topic because the intention of it and interpretation of it is interesting. In that, is 2209 simply creating these no drone zones where you say no drone should fly there? Well, you're like, well, that's probably not the case because there should be some drones who fly there. Like, for example, if you're a nuclear power plant, they probably going to want to fly drones either now or at some point in the future, their own drones. So you're like, okay, so it can't be just that this is a no drone zone. So we got past that. But then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what happens if the nuclear power plant hires a contractor to come out because there's construction being done? Yeah. Should they be allowed to do that? Or does that contractor then have to go to the FAA to ask approval to fly there? Okay, well, what happens if there's a local wildlife photographer who is going to be, who's doing research, right? This is a very real case. The university was working with a wildlife photographer. They're doing this project, right? And it was right on the edge of a piece of critical infrastructure, right? So in that case, who do they call? Do they call the nuclear power plant? Nuclear power plant says, sure, that's like way on the edge of our property, but technically on our property. Yeah. But now are they going to have to go through this whole process with the FAA? What is that process? Right? What happens if they believe that there's no risk in them doing that, but the piece of critical infrastructure says, no, you can't do that. Nobody is allowed to fly here, right? Yeah. Should they have the ultimate veto approval? Should it be blanket? Should it only be during, high risk do you do a risk assessment on every piece of critical infrastructure and every single drone operation, essentially having to get a waiver, which we've seen is extremely expensive for the federal government to implement, extremely slow, and not transparent at all. So you end up paying a lot of money to develop these waivers, and you cross your fingers and hope you get it.
Yeah. So what's your bottom line on it? What's your position?
The bottom line is it's certainly it's complicated.
Yeah.
And I think that the most important thing is that you recognize that with 2209, with any place that drones shouldn't fly, there is some case for that drones should fly there.
Mm.
And I think that what to me makes the most sense is that you say, look, there's going to be drones that fly there. And what's important is that the drones that are flying there are authorized, that they're supposed to be there. And that's where like the wisdom technology, we talked a little bit about like being able to identify, right? Like that trusted, military grade cryptography where you can identify this drone is the one that's supposed to be here, right? Attach the drone. And now, this is the drone that's supposed to be there. But then on top of that, being able to say, and we have the detection, identification, and even mitigation technology to know that if somebody's doing something that's truly nefarious, we can stop them. I think that would make critical infrastructure feel a lot more comfortable authorizing people to fly there if they said, we know who our drones are and the ones that we've authorized, and we know that we gave them permission to fly on this area side of the property, and we know that they stayed there.
Well,
right?
Gosh, my brain is hurting now because, as I'm listening to you, Luke, I'm thinking my brain went right to abrogation rights and this idea, as you said, who should be the approval authority? Is it the FAA? Is it the critical infrastructure owner? Where does the land end and the air begin when it comes to things like this? Boy, you're right. It's a huge, huge can of worms. But we'll see what comes out of this infrastructure bill.
Yep.
Where the money is put with regards to building out drone use and in support of critical infrastructure. And if 2209 or any of these other things actually get addressed in the near term. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's all a big question mark right now. But
they're solvable problems. That's the thing.
Yeah, they're hard problems, but they're solvable.
They're solvable with the right technology. And the technology exists.
Yeah. And you're obviously a part of that solution. So, you talked about Stratus, but is DroneFox, tell us a little bit about DroneFox. We only have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
I want to also give you a time to wrap up and also tell people how they can contact you.
Yeah.
Before we sign off. And I do want to tell people about, what's next on the horizon. But, if you could maybe just very briefly tell us about DroneFox and how it's different from Stratus or how they work together.
Sure, absolutely. So DroneFox provides the world's longest range detection, highest fidelity identification, and safest mitigation technology for drones.
Okay,
and so
limited.
It's the sensor, it's the hardware, it's deployed. We have customers who, there's option to turn off the mitigation for some customers who want that. And that, they say, hey, in 2 years, we probably want, we're going to have that and we're going to turn it on. That's certainly an option. But in general, it's detection, identification, mitigation. It's the sensor. We have customers use it mobile. So they go and deploy it at an event, right? At the wildfires, right? You go set it up and now you can protect that TFR. And you can, instead of shutting down the entire TFR just because there's a drone that's in the area, you can track the drone, know where the drone is, and say just deconflict, right? And that's where this data, that's the high fidelity data, the identification, do that real-time threat assessment as well as the forensic threat assessment to know, looking back, is it a threat, right? To be able to actually make informed decisions.
No, that's beautiful. Does it actually play into or connect at all with Stratus?
Yes. Yeah. So Stratus, so you can think of Stratus as the WhiteFox sensors deployed across the country. What Stratus is being able to tap into that existing infrastructure.
Okay. And it could include some of these mobile units that you're talking about when they go online.
Exactly.
Okay, roger that. Okay, that makes an abundant amount of sense. All right, awesome. All right, just here's your, claim to fame here, your 30-second elevator speech. What do you got for us, Luke, before we sign off on this first episode of the Dawn of Drones?
Absolutely. Well, first off, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, whether you're listening live or you're coming back. And I really appreciate you having me, Don, and the entire team at DroneLife. I think the message that I hope that everybody hears is that drone technology has so much power to change the world. And it's up to us every single day in how we use drone technology and all of the services and the systems and technology around the drone technology to enable people to trust drones. And everything we need to do, and everything that we do needs to be centered around how do we build transparency and accountability into how drones are used, because ultimately that is what is going to allow them to reach their biggest potential, and that allows us to ensure that people know that the people who shouldn't be flying aren't flying, that the people who are flying, we know that who they are and that they should be there, and that allows us to solve all these problems like 2209 and people shooting down drones with shotguns, left and right, and drones crashing into the World Trade Center and delaying airports and causing fires to rage out of control, right? Like all these, they're solvable problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't foot stomp that more. And actually, it's a perfect segue to talk about wildfires, which we're going to talk about next week. Like I said, same time, same place. So be here next week at 11 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Mountain, where we're going to have Ben Miller and Todd Spain. Both of these gentlemen are from Colorado. They're doing amazing things with aerial drone technology and advanced air mobility. Both of them are actually going to be on my clubhouse tomorrow as well. So again, Drone Law Connections, 11 a.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So hope to see you there. And Luke, as we dial off, what's the best way for people to contact you and follow up if they want to learn more about, drone, WhiteFox or DroneFox or Stratus?
Absolutely. So you visit us on our website, whitefoxdefense.com. White is in the color, defense. White is in the color, fox is in the animal, and the defense.com. LinkedIn is where we're most active, where I'm most active. Find me on there, message me on there. I'd love to hear you. If there's anything I could do to support any of our listeners here, anything I could do, please let me know. We're here. We're all in this together to unlock the drone industry and all of the potential it has to completely change the world. It takes each and every one of us. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. We're all in this together.
All right, awesome. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for our first Dawn of Drones out here.